Thank you. Access to clean water is a constitutional right under Section 77 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Many citizens rely on private borehole drilling due to inadequate municipal water supply. It is essential that everyone has access to safe water. According to the 2022 population and housing census, 19% of households in rural areas take more than 30 minutes to fetch drinking water from a water point, while 69% take up to 30 minutes. That is the ZimStat 2024. This lack of access to water has forced many households to use their own funds to drill boreholes through private sector service providers, leading to the growth of private borehole drilling services. Mr. Speaker, the proliferation of private sector borehole drilling services in Zimbabwe, which, while providing an essential alternative water source for many households, has exposed consumers to significant financial exploitation and loss. The absence of a robust regulatory framework has created an environment where citizens bear the full financial burden of unsuccessful drilling, a situation that is both inequitable and unsustainable. Presently, the cost of drilling a borehole stands at approximately USD 1,100 for a depth of 40 meters. With additional drilling beyond this point, incurring charges of $25 to $30 per meter in regions where the water table exceeds 70 meters. Citizens are compelled to pay around USD $2,000 only to face the devastating reality of a dry borehole. This exorbitant financial outlay, coupled with the absence of consumer safeguards, leaves many households in severe debt without access to water they desperately need. The prevailing practice wherein clients bear the full cost of a non-productive borehole is a fundamental unjust. Many vulnerable Zimbabweans already grappling with water scarcity invest their life savings into these ventures only to be left with nothing but financial ruin. Meanwhile, private drilling companies operate with minimum oversight, facing no accountability for failed projects, thereby perpetuating a cycle of exploitation. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that access to clean and reliable water remains a pressing challenge for rural communities across Zimbabwe. According to the latest data from ZimStat 2023, over 60% of the rural population of approximately 7 million depend on boreholes as their primary water source. This staggering figure underscores the indispensable role that boreholes play in sustaining livelihoods. Without boreholes, households are forced to depend on unsafe alternatives such as contaminated rivers, shallow wells, and stagnant ponds, exposing them to deadly waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid. The United Nations 2020 has emphasized that women and girls bear the heaviest burden of water scarcity, as they are primarily responsible for water collection. When water is not available on premises and the children spend hours each day fetching water, that time could otherwise be spent on education, income-generating activities, or agricultural productivity. Mr. Speaker, despite the critical need for boreholes, the exorbitant costs and the high risk of dry holes place an unbearable financial strain on rural households. Unlike in regulated industries, where feasibility assessments and consumer protections are mandatory, private drillers operate without accountability, leaving desperate citizens with no recourse for compensation. This predatory exploitation of vulnerable communities is undesirable. Rural Zimbabweans who already contend with poverty, food insecurity, and limited economic opportunities cannot afford to lose their meager resources on failed boreholes. This situation is not peculiar to rural areas only, even the urban areas. The absence of a mandatory hydrogeological surveys, standardized pricing, and consumer guarantees has created a wild market where drillers profit at the expense of struggling households. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, while we recognize the borehole drilling inherently involves an element of uncertainty or probability, it is my considered submission that the financial burden of a dry holes should not fall entirely upon the consumer. The current arrangement where households bear 100% of the cost for dry holes is fundamentally inequitable and demands urgent legislative intervention. I therefore propose the implementation of a mandatory cost-sharing mechanism wherein drilling companies assume a proportionate share of the financial risk. Such as arrangement would serve two critical purposes. Firstly, it would provide much-needed consumer protection for vulnerable households, investing their limited resources in water access. And secondly, it would incentivize drilling operators to exercise greater diligence in site selection and hydrogeological assessment prior to commencing operations. This balanced approach would ensure that both parties, the service provider and the consumer, share both the risks and responsibility inherent in borehole drilling, thereby creating a fairer and more sustainable sector. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MASVISVI. The question before the House is a motion by Honorable MASVISVI as set forth on page 2438 of today's order paper. Is there any debate? I recognize, is that Honorable Ngwenya?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support the motion that has been moved by Honorable MASVISVI. I would actually dwell mainly on the issues that affect our communities. As highlighted by Honorable MASVISVI, I'm now highlighting critical issues affecting our communities, especially those in rural areas. That is places like Kumunyu, Mashame, and so forth. When contractors fail to strike water, villagers are left without the resource they desperately need, while contractors walk away with the hefty payments. It is unacceptable that they offer no refund at all or being charged any penalty for failing to afford the communities that particular resource. Mr. Speaker, I propose that contractors should be incentivized to deliver successful bores, which I will call wet holes. This could be achieved through payment structures that tie those contractors to compensation. the success of the borehole, rather than just the drilling process, will actually lead to many successful boreholes being carried out by those contractors. That is, will ensure that our communities get the water they need. Also, these contractors must be held accountable for their work. It is time for us to prioritize the needs of our people over the interests of contractors. We need to work together to make borehole drilling a more effective and accountable process. Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw inspiration from other countries that have actually successfully implemented safeguards to mitigate the risks associated with borehole drilling and dry wells. We have international practices, best practices we draw from countries like Australia that has actually implemented a robust regulating framework, ensuring drillers adhere to strict guidelines and environmental standards. In Africa here, we have a country like Kenya. It has actually introduced an innovative financing model where drilling costs are tied to successful outcomes. Incentivizing drillers to deliver productive boreholes, it's one of the requirements in Kenya. And also, I would like to call for the safeguards, to implement safeguards for the dry wells, that is, wells that are drilled but they do not produce any water. There has to be contractual obligations, that is, drillers should be bound to refund or re-drill at no additional cost if a dry well is encountered. Because of late, we've seen the drillers, whenever they drill a borehole, there is a dry well, they do not refund anything. Also, there is need for proper geological surveys, and they should be made mandatory. That is, the contractors themselves should be engaged in that process, whereby they conduct those surveys prior to drilling to minimize the risk of dry wells. And also, they should engage the communities in the whole process, because at the end of the day, the communities are the ones who remain behind without the necessary water, the precious water, which is very important. I therefore call for those drilling to actually, whenever they drill, they should engage these communities. And by learning from the international best practice and implementing effective safeguards, we can reduce the risk associated with borehole drilling and ensure that our communities have access to reliable and sustainable water sources. On that note, I therefore fully support this motion moved by Honorable MASVISVI and call for this House to adopt this particular motion. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Ngwenya. Is there any further debate? I recognize the Deputy Chief Whip.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the debate be now adjourned.
Who seconds?
I second, Honorable Speaker, sir.
It has been moved that the debate be now adjourned. Is there any debate? I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the debate is adjourned. To what day, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip?
To tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the House be now adjourned.
Who seconds?
I second Honorable Speaker, sir.
It has been moved that the House do now adjourn. Is there any debate? I put the question that the House do now adjourn. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed, and the House is adjourned. To what day, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip?
To tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The House is adjourned to tomorrow. Good evening.